you're being reminded of the fact that this is going to catch up with you at some stage. So you're boxing its shadows, if not every day, every third day. So if there's anyone out there that sort of, this isn't happening for you, I just want you to imagine just having that little thing just walking about 10 metres behind you all the time, for 10, 15, 20 years. And you're just waiting for it to bite you.
That's Sexuality in Sport crusader Dave Oliver. Dave has always lived and breathed rugby, a game known as one of the roughest and most hypermasculine on earth. He's also gay, and from the time he was a teenager until his early 30s, he hid his sexuality from everyone. Horrified that he'd be found out and ridiculed by the community that means everything to him.
It was a square peg in a round hole, that for me was incredibly frightening.
Dave describes the burden he carried for the best part of 2 decades as toxic shame, a form of self-loathing that drove him to abuse drugs and self-destruct.
I'd graduated to using methamphetamine around that time. So it's very hard to talk about, what my feelings genuinely were because I was so discombobulated.
Dave's since been through rehab more than once and has done a huge amount of work on acceptance and learning to love the man he truly is. Now he's on a mission to help change the face of sexuality in male-dominated sports by sharing his story with clubs, codes and men around the country to convince them it's time to change the game. Welcome to Young Blood, a podcast all about young men's health. My name's Callum McPherson, I'm a journalist, and this is our mission to talk about the stuff that matters and isn't talked about enough. Let's do it. This episode has been made possible by Kookaburra Homes, one of the best custom home builders going around. Kookaburra does a lot to support the health of the local community here in South Australia and are big supporters of Young Blood's mission to improve the lives of young men through having these conversations that we need to have. Dave, what role has rugby played in your life?
What role has it played in my life? Well, rugby is my life, I suppose, is the easiest way to explain it. I was born into the game at a very young age. Brought into the game at a very young age, growing up in central west New South Wales. And had a father that was president of a local rugby club there and spent all of those early years holding his hand on the sideline or the middle of halftime huddles or, going into the clubhouse after the game. And then that involvement in the game continued for many years, playing in junior sport through school. And then my involvement in the game then developed towards coaching, where I spent numerous years coaching in Sydney and over in Ireland. And I've also been an administrator, a referee. At one stage, I was an assistant video analyst for the Wallabies in the high performance unit, working for the Australian Rugby Union.
So every part of the game, you've had a hand in at some point. What is it about it that you love so much?
I absolutely love everything that rugby stands for. It's a game that's very inclusive as far as there's a position on the field for people of every body shape. Me being an old tight-head prop, I was never going to survive in AFL or might have been able to play a bit of rugby league, but there's a spot on the field for the skinny kids and the fat kids and the short kids and the small kids. So from that perspective, it's a great sport. It's a very international sport. I got to coach over in Ireland, which was massive for me. I had 2 seasons over there and really loved that. But I found the social side, which is growing up in a country, in a rural landscape. It really was the epicenter of the social scene of the town. And I really enjoyed that. I made a lot of my friendships, and I know a lot of my parents' friendships were made in that environment as well. So all of that mixed in together.
And you grew up in a tight-knit, pretty small town of about 10,000 people. Was rugby really the lifeblood of that community in terms of that's where everyone is on the weekend and often after work and those sorts of things?
Absolutely. I think if you look at your big 3 winter sports in Australia, rugby union and rugby league were the 2 major sports in Kiara, where I grew up, and whether it was, and I ended up being a publican back in my hometown there for a while, and so whether you're actually at training or whether you're at the pub during the week, that generally the conversation was about what the selections were, which kids were coming up, through the ranks, who their father was, were kids coming home from boarding school that weekend to play for town, all of those interesting little tidbits really made up the chunks of the general chatter around town during the week.
And so how much of your identity did you draw from you the rugby player?
Well, and this is it. That's probably what I was referring to back then. Is that it was everything. It became my identity. It became what I believe to be, I hate that term, but what I was supposed to be, I suppose, was this hyper-masculine, hyper-aggressive bloke that could, that could be the rugby guy on the field, but also be that persona, that bloke off the field, which has tied into it all sorts of different stereotypes.
And did you feel like there was an unspoken rule that you can't be gay and play rugby? Was that a battle that you had inside of yourself?
Oh yeah, look, it was a square peg in a round hole, and that for me was incredibly frightening, because I was really grasping with some instances of abuse that had occurred outside of my family from a young age, that was sexual abuse, and coming to terms with my sexuality and the toxic shame cycle that I got in with my mental health was embedded there from a very young age, and it's a very hard thing to talk about, because I come from a very loving family, very loving environment, very protective, but there was this dark shadow that was going on. That is, it's that terrible term. It still makes me shiver when you talk about it to people. Is what toxic shame does to you.
And how old were you when you realised that you were gay?
I'd have to say maybe 17, 18. The sort of sexual attraction towards girls was dissipating, and there was certainly more of an attraction towards men was happening around that age.
And were you thinking through those teenage years that maybe it's just a phase, maybe it's something I'll grow out of? Were you sort of hoping, given your love for rugby and these two things butting heads, that would be the case and that it would change?
Absolutely, and I think that's where, if we really are going to be honest about what went on for me, it was incredibly confusing. The sexual experimentation that was going on through those teenage years, you read a lot about, happens a lot between young boys and young girls, and teenage boys and teenage girls. And for me, I thought, okay, well, that's happened, and those instances of engagements were happening through the late teens and in the early 20s, but a lot of the men and older boys, I suppose, that those instances, those moments were occurring with, their lives seemed to be progressing through a heterosexual curve, and I was sort of felt like I was stuck in this, I suppose, this homosexual rut of attraction, and I found that incredibly confusing for me. And having had many discussions now with men along the way, it seems to me that the sexuality situation, for what I believe, is a bit of a spectrum, and we've got to do away with this. I'm wrong. I'm disordered. That shouldn't have happened. I'm now gay, or I'm now, this is going to be a problem for me, because from what we now know through modern society and modern life, that's just not the case.
Just take us through the internal conflict that you felt through that time, and what you suffered coming to grips with your sexuality, hand in hand with the game that you were playing and the community you were a part of, and how you knew or thought you knew you'd be judged if people found out about that.
It's until you've experienced toxic shame, it's a lot of people try and throw it in the same basket as depression and anxiety. So you have sort of depression being you're sort of a bit worried about what happened in the past, anxiety a bit nervous about what's happening in the future. When you have toxic shame, you have a problem with who you are, with what you are, and that cycle for large chunks of time. I suppose I haven't been diagnosed with depression or anxiety, but I'd imagine, having been through a rehab process twice now and been around a lot of people that have explained how that comes in waves, toxic shame can sit there for 5 days, for 5, 6, 9, 12, 15 nights in a row, just before you go to sleep, thinking, I'm wrong. I'm not worthy of being in that group of mates. I'm not worthy of being able to play rugby. I'm not worthy of working for the Wallabies. I'm not worthy of what I suppose you have this existential crisis. It's like, I'm wrong. How's this happening to me? And that feeling is so debilitating. It is so crushing, and it can go on for a long time. And that's generally where the confliction comes from.
And that self-loathing's so overwhelming, but it's also a battle that's just going on inside of you. You can't share it with anyone, and that's part of the problem. Or feeling like you couldn't. It's able to manifest and get worse and worse and worse because it's all being held inside of you. And as we know, no matter what it is, if we hold something inside of us for long enough, it causes all kinds of problems. It does.
And that, I only came out, again, I hate we have to come out. I had to tell everyone, early 30s, I'm 39 now. And, it's so hard to hear my father say to me, I'm so sorry that you felt you couldn't tell us. My two sisters, who I love very much, I'm very close to. And I've had mates come up and just whack me on the shoulder and say, mate, what was doing? Why couldn't you tell us? And
so realising that plenty of it was actually in your head. And a lot of those reactions that you thought were a certainty didn't come to pass at all. But you're grappling with what you think the problem is going to be rather than the actual problem itself.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big moments for me, there was a social media campaign, I don't know how long ago, but it was a little while ago, called It Gets Better. Itgetsbetter.com or whatever it was. I think it was launched in the UK or the US. And it was brilliant. And it was just coming out stories. And I remember it just popped up on my Facebook feed. And I remember watching all these amazing videos of people talking about, going through that process. And the common link through those stories was that, that moment. It was just like when I did it, when I got to talk to people about my sexuality, a part of me that, for whatever reason, in modern society, that we have to share, that people have to know about, and that's a conversation for another day. People just say, I had my moment, and it was just amazing. There was such a small percentage of people that were like, it became harder. My parents kicked me out, all that sort of stuff. And those stories it breaks my heart to think that that's what happened for them. It certainly didn't happen for me. The collective hug that I got from, I was running that pub back in Cowra. My family, my friends, my extended rugby family from across the globe, all stepped up in a massive way to tell me that they loved me and they accepted me and it wasn't going to be a problem.
And how did you react to that when that happened? It must have been a big surprise.
Unfortunately, it coincided with the crescendo of my coping mechanism, which was substance misuse and abuse. I'd graduated to using methamphetamine around that time. So it's very hard to talk about, what my feelings genuinely were because I was so discombobulated through that period. But it was a relief. Methamphetamine is one of those inhibition lowering substances on steroids. So would I have come out had I not have been exposed to meth in Cowra around that town? I'm not sure, but it happened, and that's perfect. And I'm here now, being able to tell the story.
Was that a symptom of your not being comfortable with who you are?
I think so. Look, I started drinking heavily when I was 15. I was the first kid that could scull a jug. I was the first kid that could, get a six-pack.
That was part of your identity.
It was. Look, I think it started from such a young age. And having now gone through rehab twice, the first time I went through rehab, I sort of felt I needed to be cured of meth. And I've recently just gone through another 5-week program. I'm a few weeks out of that. And I've learned more about me. I've learned more about what was going on. I've learned about my codependency. I've learned about how I had to create this better than persona because I was so ashamed of this little boy that was so conflicted, this young version of me that we talk about going back and reparenting that young version of me. It's an amazing process. So it's I don't want to call it unraveling because that's a negative connotation. It's sort of like I'm walking towards these things and I'm
like an awakening.
It is, mate. It is. When I talk to guys, I can see the wheels spinning. I can see the cogs turning, that they just, and whether it's about sexuality or whether it's about codependency or coming to terms with anything, loss, grief, any anxiety about any family situations, work situations, we're all basically the same. We've all got a bit of stuff going on.
That's right.
And I just say that, you know, it all stinks a bit. It's just that I feel that my shit sort of stinks a little bit more, and I've just had to sort of work a bit harder to turn it into fertilizer. If that makes sense.
What a beautiful analogy. So it sounds like a big piece of your puzzle was self-love, and that the meth use and the self-abuse is tied in with that.
Mate, and this is where it tears me apart. And it is absolutely in all of my doctor's notes, all of my psych notes from rehab recently, all of my path is, it's this ACT, it's this acceptance and commitment therapy. It's about having so much love around me in my life. Again, my beautiful family, my extended family, very close, big Christmases, you know, all that sort of stuff. I don't have those issues in my life. It's so hard to say to people that I still find it, I do today. I struggle to turn that light that people see shine outwards. I struggle to turn that light in on me. So it's a hard thing to explain, because people are just like, just get over it, mate. Everyone loves you. You're right. You're sweet. You know, there's nothing wrong with you. Just go with it. And it's just like, it is so counterintuitive to put me first, and to look at myself and love myself. And that's this period that I'm going through now.
You got to really recondition your brain and your perspective, and that takes years of dedicated work. It's not something that just you can flip a switch and it happens overnight. No. But I will say you are looking really good.
Thanks, mate.
So whatever you're doing, it's definitely working. And looking at some of those, you came prepared. Looking at some of those photos from the articles that you've done in the past that were panning back, 5-10 years, you're looking much, much healthier now. And obviously the body's a manifestation of what's going on inside as well. So in terms of the way you viewed homosexuality as a young person, were you taught that it wasn't acceptable by your family, or did you come to that in your own mind?
I don't have any distinct memories of outright homophobia, casual homophobia, casual racism, casual sexism. Those terms today are completely unacceptable. And we've finally arrived at that point. I think people still struggle with that. It's okay to be a bit like this at the pub still. I could in my 20s, I could be casually homophobic, sexist, racist in that 3-hour, 4-hour drinking session at any pub in Sydney. I doubt there'd be many Australian men, especially, who consider themselves to be blokey blokes who love a schooner and like a bit of sport. I think the majority of those blokes would put their hands up and say they're incredibly ashamed about some of the stuff that they've said and done around those social environments where you just have to be, you just sort of tag the line.
And when it comes down to it, the vast majority of us don't mean it. And it's said in those things are said in jest, and actually oftentimes, as you found, when people actually say, yeah, I actually am gay or whatever it is, fortunately, in a lot of cases, they get that support and people go, oh, mate, like, thanks for telling us, and that doesn't change our relationship. But when you're going through years and years of hearing the people that you are close with taking the piss about it all the time, that's got to play on your mind massively.
It does. It becomes the negative connotation that you use when describing the opposition, when describing a soft tackle, when describing someone who's soft or someone who didn't pick up on the weekend. You become that choice word. And you hear it just becomes drilled into you. Tuesday, Thursday night at training, getting ready to warm up. If you drop something on if something doesn't, you're working on a building site and something doesn't marry up correctly or it's measured incorrectly. That word comes out again. It's if you don't, if you pull out of work because you're a bit tired, that word comes out again. So you just walk around. I walked around thinking, oh God,
Because I suppose it's being weaponized. It's being weaponized to take a shot at your masculinity. Saying gay has been treated the same as saying that you're weak or that you're less of a man based on these things that you're mentioning.
And that less than is the big problem, and that's, I still have a massive issue. It's still right front of mind that if I go to a pub and everyone's aware of what's going on. And 90% of people that I socialise around with in circles, I go, "G'day boys, how you going?" Whatever, around the TOB area, have a beer, talk about a bit of a joke about. We can even joke. We sort of, people can lighten the mood a bit. I can lighten the mood a bit. That self-deprecating humour around being gay, which I don't like, but I do anyway. Again, it's probably still a bit of my coping mechanism. But
yep.
I worry that I'm going to walk away from that circle of 4 or 5 blokes, and it's just natter. He's a poofter, he's rah rah rah, and that still eats at me.
Do you get the feeling like that actually happens, or that's just your knee-jerk response?
Absolutely. I think that's just, I know that I wouldn't associate with those people anyway. I wouldn't have them in my life if I knew that was going on. But unfortunately, it's still this little fuse, this little thing that goes off. I'm like, I'm still a gay guy in an Aussie pub, not in a gay venue, whatever. I'm still that, square peg, round hole.
So how much has it influenced your way that you see yourself as a man, growing up, and then the way that you see yourself now? How much does your sexuality impact that?
I still don't know. I to be honest, and again, because I'm a bit of a, I don't know, I can ham it up, and I have my feminine traits, absolutely, but I'm still a bit of, I like cold chisel. I'll have a rum and coke. I enjoy beer. I don't at the moment. In early recovery, I'm really keeping tabs on substance consumption. But I don't. And that was one thing that Dad said to me. He was like, you feel like, when we got to sit down and have that chat when I came out, he goes, do you feel like you've had to just completely be someone else? And I said, oh, Dad, I still hate the Waratahs. I still, I'm the same bloke. I'm just sexually attracted to men. And what happens in my bedroom and the door goes click, doesn't change who I am. It doesn't, it's all fine. So I'm still navigating that landscape, as interesting as that sounds, because everyone sort of feels that with the plebiscite, it was like, yep, sweet, you're all good. We're all sweet with it. So you guys and girls and want to be sweet with it. And it's like, I don't know. And the plebiscite was painful. It was incredibly painful to watch because it brought out the very worst in the worst, and it brought out the, that casual homophobia, that sort of casual swinging stuff. So I was very surprised by what I saw from a lot of people that I knew. Not that it's all good. And this is the thing. I'm fine if people. This is what I've learned in life. If people have an issue with the fact that I'm gay, that's fine. It's their stuff, and I'm not going to carry I'm working really hard to not carry the burden of that anymore, but it takes time. But the plebiscite was painful to watch. It was really painful, but a step in the right direction.
But I suppose the fact that at least out of that we got gay marriage approved,
yes.
That's massive for our society. But it is just one step, and then.
Yes.
The other part of your life, rugby and the footy field, we still don't see homosexuals represented in our pro sports in those most hyper-masculine games, AFL, rugby union, rugby league. We still don't have that representation, and that statistically there has to be a number of players that are gay who feel like they still can't come out and be open about that. Despite the fact that we do have gay marriage and it's a lot more widely accepted than it was a generation ago or a decade ago. But yet we still have that part of our society which seems to be holding on and be reserved for straight males.
Absolutely. And that's what I'm learning when I'm having these offline conversations with men who do come to me and say, listen, I'm sexually attracted to men. I have sort of same sexual interactions that you've had through your 20s. I'm not sure. I'm confused. I think I'm bisexual. And it's the label. So I was just like, okay, well, am I going to have to get an earring? Do I wear leather? Am I going to have to go on a float at Mardi Gras? Extremely proud. A year or so ago, I drove one of the floats for the Canberra guys and girls for Mardi Gras. And that was an amazing. I said, look, I'm not ready for the float, but I'll drive the ute.
But you didn't feel like you wanted to, or that you should have to conform to a stereotype of what being gay is.
No, and I think that's what scares a lot of men. And it would be, there are 100%. There are currently, and I do apologise to if there's any ladies watching this, podcast, and we're spending a lot of time talking about men. But obviously, that's how it relates to my story. But because I'd imagine the struggles would be similar. But for the blokes, you know, if there's a guy playing rugby union in a Super Rugby club at the moment, or he's part of the Australian under-21 program or something like that, and he's really struggling with his sexuality, again, that shiver that I get down my spine about what's happening that last 6 minutes before he goes to sleep most nights, it's crippling. And we need to get, that's why I want to go, when I launch this initiative and I start to walk towards this stuff, I want to get into those environments and share the story. And I really want those environments, those teams, the leadership, men and women that are part of those teams to buy into this and to genuinely say that this is a space for you. And one of the great things that I've done recently is I volunteer on the Phones for Lifeline. And one of the first things that the catch that you hear, we have little techniques that we use for our active listening when we're on the phone with help seekers, is you hear that they've disconnected from something that was happening in their life, you know. And the majority of the time I hear from male callers, and I'm not breaking confidentiality here, hopefully the Lifeline guys don't care, is I stopped playing sport, you know. And then I took up drinking, and then I got on the bongs, then I, you know, whatever it is or whatever. And
it's that detaching from community. It's that self-isolation.
Absolutely. And this is where it all comes back to men's mental health. The minute we disconnect is when we start to see the unravel, you know, those big problems start to occur. So we need to fight tooth and nail to keep every man, every boy involved in sport in Australia. That's where I want to start. But this goes as deep as the workplace. There are hyper-masculine, hyper-homophobic industries, you know, the building industry. I've got mates in the finance sector, and they said, mate, the old bull pit that used to have the old, you know, on the share market floor and stuff like that, which is now a trading floor with a lot of computers, is still very hyper-homophobic. So I believe that my calling is to go into those environments and say, hey guys, this ain't on, you know, and I'll tell you why, because when I tell you my story, and if you hear my story and you think that should happen to anyone, any of your colleagues or any of your teammates, you really need to have a good look at yourself, because I don't think you're a very nice human being, because it ain't fun.
And that's why I want to acknowledge you for just how important the work is that you're doing, and just how brave you are to do that, because someone absolutely has to stand up and do that and deliver it in a way like you deliver it, where there's no question that what you've been through and the way that you've been made to feel shouldn't be repeated for all these athletes out there these days who are grappling with the same issues, and that we can't just be selective and say, oh, well, it's okay to be gay in certain aspects of our society, or we allow it in this realm, but not on the sporting field, or not in the construction industry. We need to take that next step and go even further. And it does happen by degrees. It doesn't all happen at once, but it takes someone who's actually been through that and survived and come out proud of themselves and loving themselves and willing to encourage other men in the same situation to love themselves as well.
There are people that have done some fantastic work ahead of me. And when I explain to people what I want to do, I want to stand up on their shoulders and continue the work. I want to put my shoulder to the wheel and start to get this a lot more mainstream, get this conversation going. I want to work with kids. I want to work with parents. And again, it's just this power of story sharing.
And just explain that toxic shame, which is a phrase that you used it a few times, and what it was like for you to go to sleep with that thought in your head and always be carrying that around with you.
You're being reminded of the fact that this is going to catch up with you at some stage. So you're boxing at shadows, if not every day, every third day. So if there's anyone out there that sort of this isn't happening for you, I just want you to imagine just having that little thing just walking about 10 metres behind you all the time, you know, for 10, 15, 20 years, and you're just waiting for it to bite you. It's a long time.
What does that do to your soul, that amount of pressure?
It's terrible. And the only time that you then feel that you can explore your sexuality, the only time that you feel comfortable within your own skin is when you're intoxicated. Sorry, for me, not you. I'm talking the I. So I have this, this darkness that I have to come to terms with. A lot of the sexual engagements I was having, especially once I became of drinking age around the Sydney scene, were happening in, I don't want to say unhealthy ways, because I don't want other men to think that that's what it is when you're being gay, but it certainly felt that way, that it wasn't as nice as what it would have been like to have just gone to dinner with someone, like these heterosexual couples, or these things that were happening around me that were like, oh, we're not going to get on the drink tonight after rugby. We're going to go to the pizza joint down in Double Bay and we'll have a couple of glasses of wine and go home. And I'd be like, I'm just going to drive myself into the ground.
So it was very, very, very much based on sex and more hollow relationships and that fast-paced sort of life, rather than a nourishing relationship, actually learning about having a relationship with someone.
Absolutely.
So what's it going to take for our modern-day athletes to feel comfortable enough to say that, yes, I am gay, or I have sex with men, or whatever it is, and have society go, yep, whatever, I'm still going to wear your jersey?
It's a hard one. We look at Andy Brennan from the who just retired recently from the A-League. He's been fantastic. I've connected with Ian Roberts. Ian's a beautiful, he's just such an amazing man. Had this amazing, eloquent, conversation about the whole thing and what he would have been doing back in the day, like late 80s, early 90s in rugby league. It's what he went through and what he had to sort of suffer and to go through. So from where Ian, was to where Andy is now, where I am now, having not played at a professional level, I think we need leaders in the clubs to stand up and talk about what an inclusive environment looks like. I had numerous Pacifica players come and speak to me about how that's how they felt being of any type of colour, of any sort of Indigenous background, playing amateur sport for so many years, the choice words that they've been called. We need everyone to stand up and say that sport is for everyone. And that's what it should be like, whether it's sexuality, sex. We're now seeing women's sport is just amazing at the moment. It's such a beautiful thing to watch. So we need to be the same for Polynesian players, for homosexual players, for people who are transgender. Let's think about what's going on for these people. Let's think about really what's going on for them and how it's so important we are a sporting nation to be able to have these people participate and maintain that connection in society.
And we know that sports are a microcosm of society on a broader scale. What do you think the power is going to be when we do see sexuality more broadly represented across sport, especially in those hypermasculine sports? What effect is that going to have? I
see it as we're saving lives. We have the number one thing that's going to kill you as a male between the age of whatever it is, 16 and 44 at the moment.
15 and 44, yeah. Yep.
15 and 44 is suicide. And I bet your bottom dollar, and again, breaks my heart to think, how many men, as a part of their makeup for that decision that they wanted to attempt and complete suicide, was based around the fact that they were coming to terms with their sexuality and they weren't going to be accepted at their workplace or their sporting club. And that's not right. That's got to stop. So we're not talking about, this is a feel-good thing. We're going to save lives. We've got kids, right now with all those pressures around what's going on. We've got to get out there and let them know, so we've got to build these programs. We've got to get these lived experience people out there, and we've got to get the story out there that sport is a safe place and their workplaces are a safe place for them to just live their lives.
I think that's absolutely the angle that needs to be taken with it, because it is serious. It is that serious that it can be life and death, and it's not just, some people might feel a little bit upset about it, or they feel a bit more comfortable if they're a bit more included. It can be a life and death issue. So I think absolutely it needs to be phrased in that manner. What has it taken for you to love yourself?
It's a continuing journey, mate. It's interesting. I'm right in a really sweet spot at the moment as far as trying to get my self-care together. The counselling that I'm receiving, the follow-up work that I sort of tried to lock in only recently, having gone through rehab again. So it's an unfolding story, but it's not an easy light switch to flick on. It's going to take time. It's going to take time. But as you peel off the onion, rings or the layers of the onion, beautiful things really happen. I look at, a lot of sunsets now. I look at a lot of sunrises. I put flowers in my room. I've never made my bed before. I've never had a clean car. I've never had a clean bedroom. It's little things like that, mate. It's just day-to-day things. Knowing that I'm, telling myself that I'm worthy of love and I'm worthy of these beautiful things and a beautiful life.
What is the danger of pretending that everything's okay with all your might?
The danger of pretending that everything's okay is, for me personally, is relapse on all of its forms. So relapse could be substance abuse. It could be going back to just hating myself and believing that I'm not worthy, those sorts of things. So I have to, it's all about consistency of effort. And I don't want it to be an effort. I really want to just wake up every day and believe that this path now that's lighting up ahead of me is one that I want to walk. And there wasn't even a path, there wasn't a brick, there wasn't even a torch for so many years. It was just this darkness, this loop of feeling like a piece of dirt. So that's the trick.
What's the relief of being able to lift that burden off your shoulders finally after all these years?
Yeah, look, it's massive. I'm incredibly lucky. My trampoline is very close just behind me, my little bounce back point, and that's my family, the people that I love, the people that I have in my life right now, my tight circle. I genuinely, honestly get so much love and support, and that's such a throwaway line, but it's now different because I can talk about me. I can talk about, it's okay. I'm doing lots of work on Eckhart Tolle about the power of now. And I'm only interested in the past when I really want to talk about how it's going to serve me in the present. And I do have to pay recognition to things that have happened in the past, but I'm so much more present in conversations with people. I'm not waiting for that question. I'm not thinking, it's not that game of chess in my head. Are they going to ask why I'm not married? All these sorts of stuff. I can just sit there now and say, yeah, I'm gay. I don't know. People are like, you're going to meet a bloke. What are you going to do? If you go to a gay bar, it's okay to have those conversations now. And that's an amazing experience. And I'm letting that just permeate through me as much as I possibly can. And I'm surrounding myself with people that let that magic happen.
That's beautiful, mate. How's your club treat you?
A little bit of a break at the moment, but the two clubs that I've coached openly gay at, the Joondalup Brothers in WA and recently the ANU, the Uni North Owls in Canberra, life-saving seasons with those two clubs. I have so much love and respect for the people that run those clubs. And I have a feeling it would be the same at most rugby clubs that if I went to now, if I put my hand up to coach or play again, God forbid. But yeah, it's I want to stay involved, but at the moment, unfortunately, because of how passionate I am about the sport, I've just had to pull the reins back a bit because I just won't be able to focus on me if I put rugby first at the moment, and I put it first every time I do anything. So no rugby at the moment.
And do you think that those clubs are ready to receive other players and staff members that are gay as well? How do you think that they're going to be embraced by clubs and clothes around the country?
Look, absolutely, and I'm proud to say that I've been contacted privately from both of those clubs, from men in particular who have expressed that it's something that they might be is walking a similar path, a similar journey, and I've told them that I'm there for them, and that their situation will unfold absolutely in time when it's just right for them, and they've got the support from me to do it. So it's happening already. And
just tell us a little bit about your initiative that you're pushing. You mentioned it a bit earlier, but where's that up to, and what's the short-term future for that?
Yeah, so I've received lots of support I am developing I'm calling it sexuality, sport and masculinity, but I'm sort of just tweaking with that at the moment because might not just be sport, it might be sexuality and masculinity, I'm not sure. But the idea is it's just a lived experience. It's a presentable resource that will have a sort of a group of advisors from some key background areas that I know can advise me on what appropriate language for different spaces, and just to get it all packaged up in a nice sort of 30 to 45 minute presentation that's school age appropriate as well. I'd like for it to be that as well, just to get out there and tell the story about toxic shame, and about how we need to create more inclusive environments for especially men, hyper-masculine and hyper-homophobic environments to start with, and then we'll see what happens after that.
And so are you planning to do some touring as well around to clubs to present it yourself personally, or is it going to be something that other people can then teach to their players and their communities?
Yeah, I'd like for it to be both. I'd like to obviously collaborate with anyone who's interested in collaborating in this space. But to start with, it's one man's journey, and I hope that it'll just get it'll snowball from there. But yeah, I'm just happy. You know, we're anyone that wants me, I'll be there with a laptop, a projector, and a microphone, and I'll tell the story. And hopefully there's that one kid, that one boy, especially in the room, or that one man that just goes home that night and goes to sleep thinking, you know, I'm okay. If I can just have that person that night, you know, or within 48 hours of my presentation, just going, okay, you know, I can do this. You know, that if I could do that once, that's what a lot of people say when they start initiatives. If I could find one guy, I'd pack the whole thing up and, I don't know, get back into working in pubs. No, I won't do that. But,
I'm sure it'll be a lot more than one. What is your message to all the young men who are out there right now hiding their sexuality for fear of judgment?
Just to tell them that they're worthy, you know, that they're lovable, that they're loved, you know, that they are absolutely 100% worthy of their existence, of their time on this earth, that I understand their pain, I understand the confliction, and that's okay, you know, and you can sit in that, you can sit with that and know that you'll be safe, and that the bad days can be bad, and that's fine, you know, and please use Lifeline and those sorts of resources. Reach out to anyone if you need to, if you really are in crisis. But just know that those feelings will pass, and that when you're ready for your journey to start, that the amount of love that you're going to feel, and the man that and the boy and the man that you're going to become when you can again, I hate the fact that this is our society, that we need to do this, but this is our reality at the moment. The man that you're going to become is just going to be, you know, you're going to be more complete. And I wish you all the best.
If you're a fan of the work we're doing or have a suggestion for the show, please rate us on Apple Podcasts and leave a comment. You can follow Youngblood Men's Health Matters on Facebook, Instagram and YouTube, and visit our website youngbloodmedia.com.au to stay up to date. And most importantly, if this conversation resonated with you, share it with someone you love and start a conversation of your own. This is Youngblood. Thanks for being part of the mission. Catch you next time.